Hi, this is Gene Thornton from Nutley, New Jersey, and I play at Hendricks Field Golf Course. This is Golf Smarter number 950.
Playing from the rough takes two stories. Both actually have contrasting parameters to them. One is the story of my life, starting in abject poverty, moving into a world of successful businessman, globe-trotting around the world, filled with more privilege than poverty. There's a parallel story that's told of me playing the top 100 golf courses. I use that story also to show the contrast in the world of golf, which for so long was like a standard bearer for segregation. So you have this black guy who grew up in poverty that's going to all of the most exclusive golf courses in the country, places where people who look like me were prohibited from going.
The compelling journey to play America's top 100 courses in 1 year with author Jimmie James.
This is Golf Smarter, sharing stories, tips, and insights from great golf minds to help you lower your score and raise your golf IQ. Here's your host, Fred Greene.
Welcome to the Golf Smarter podcast, Jimmie.
Hello, Fred. Happy to be here.
How are you?
I'm great. How are you today? Doing well. How are you?
I'm doing well, too. I'm so excited to talk to you because your book, it comes to me. And last week we talked to somebody about, creating your own bucket list. And then this week I have this book where you exceeded bucket lists goals, right? I mean, the quote alone from Rick Riley on your book is so perfect. He says, "I'm so damn jealous of Jimmie James. He not only pulled off my dream golf adventure, but he wrote a book so good, I haven't spoken to my laptop in a week." I love that because he's prolific at the very least.
He is. He writes a lot of really good books, has a great sense of humor. I even quote him in my book, In Playing from the Rough, when I'm playing at Augusta on the 12th hole, and he talks about all of the green jackets that have been lost on the 12th hole. More green jackets have been lost on the 12th hole than at the Augusta dry cleaners. But he has a way of really getting to the heart of the matter.
Yeah, he really does. But you did too. This book goes in so many directions as far as you writing a memoir about your life, but also a memoir about your golf adventure. Give me a summary. Give that person who's listening, give them a summary of your book, and then we'll go from there.
All right. Well, Playing from the Rough takes two stories that both actually have contrasting parameters to them. One is the story of my life, starting in abject poverty and moving into a world of much, much different, successful businessman, globe-trotting around the world, more born into a life of poverty, entered into a world filled with more privilege than poverty. There's a parallel story that's told of me playing the top 100 golf courses. And I use that story also to show the contrast in the world of golf, which for so long was like a standard bearer for segregation. So you have this black guy who grew up in poverty that's going to all of the most exclusive golf courses in the country, places where people who look like me at one time were prohibited from going. And so I contrast.
We're prohibited from being a member from playing, but not from being an employee.
Right, not from working there. But right. So it's really two stories braided together with common themes of progress made, but a need for even more progress to be made.
Exactly. And the stories are both compelling. As standalone stories, they're both compelling. And as you mentioned, you played Augusta. So your goal was to play, this was post-retirement from a very successful business career. And we'll get into the details of that later. But you set a goal for yourself to play the top 100 courses in the United States in 1 year. Not just play them, but to do it in 1 year, which is quite a bodacious goal to set for yourself. And you do it by starting at Augusta National, probably the hardest of all the courses to get onto.
So that in itself sounds a little insane, probably because it was insane. Making it even more insane is that my goal was to get on all of these courses without ever asking, by just talking about what I was doing and seeing if through kindness and generosity and interest, and if I'm able to stir within others a desire to help me achieve a goal that I've set for myself. And so that makes it even more ridiculous that I thought I could do something like that. But for the most part, 75% of the people who hosted me or helped me during the journey, I did not know when I started the journey.
Wow. So how did you get to the first one? You weren't invited as far as Augusta. Let's establish how you got onto Augusta, then started the journey of having people invite you.
Yeah. So when I played Augusta, and I'll tell the story of how I got onto Augusta. Augusta was a gift from my wife. Both of us have careers, dynamic careers, and we traveled a lot in those careers, and we moved a lot, sometimes driven by my career, sometimes driven by her career. She was a professor and then a senior associate dean at the Darden School at the University of Virginia. And I was with ExxonMobil. We were headquartered in Fairfax, Virginia at the time. And then the opportunity to become dean at the Goizueta School, at business school at Emory University, came along for her. And to show her appreciation for my support in her making that move and into that job, she was determined to get me on to Augusta National. So at a board meeting with her advisory board, she asked if any of her advisory board members knew anyone from Augusta that would be willing to invite her husband to come and play at Augusta National. And Lynn Rogers, an Atlanta businessman, said he was friends with Danny Yates, and the Yates family in Georgia, they're like royalty.
Charlie Yates?
Yeah, so Danny is Charlie's nephew. So okay. Danny's dad, P. Dan Yates, is a cousin, is a brother to Charlie Yates, and
senior or junior
to Charlie Yates Sr. So Charlie Yates Jr. and Danny are cousins. So P. Dan Yates and Charlie Yates.
Charlie Yates Jr. is a friend of mine, yes, who I'm hoping next year when I come to Atlanta, I'll be playing golf with Charlie Yates Jr.
So I've played golf with Charlie Yates Jr. also, and Charlie and I
similar circles now.
Yeah, Charlie and I served together on a committee for an event at Eastlake, and we also helped support a program that Emory University has for an exchange program where students from Emory and Georgia Tech go over to St. Andrews for a 1-year program. And so Charlie and I know each other through that also. So getting back to what we were talking about earlier, so that's how I ended up on Augusta. It had nothing to do with playing the top 100 courses in the world. It was my wife being determined to give me the opportunity to experience what it would be like to play golf at Augusta National.
I totally understand a determined wife who can break down a lot of walls.
Yes.
It's a similar situation. Oh, that's a phenomenal story. So let's just review your round at Augusta. How did that go? Well, and starting with walking on the grounds, not just your golf itself, but what did you go through when you arrived?
It's interesting. So we flew in from Atlanta, and we were picked up at the executive airport in a van driven to Augusta. And you drive down Washington Avenue, Washington Street, and it does not prepare you for Augusta National. It's this furlong stretch of land with neon signs and strip malls. And then you make a turn and the gates open up and you're riding down Magnolia Lane with the overarching branches of the magnolia trees, looking straight ahead at this antebellum clubhouse with a wraparound porch. And then it hits you. It hit me. It takes your breath away. I am at Augusta National. It's surreal, and so you have to catch yourself. So we played the par 3 first, and then we had lunch, and then we went to the first tee. And I really don't even remember. My head was so far above the clouds, I don't even remember how we got from the clubhouse to the first tee. They're just next to each other, but I really don't remember that walk.
Wow.
And then I'm really nervous. I don't want to embarrass my host. I don't want to embarrass myself. And this is a part of where I think back also to just, how did this kid who used to run barefoot down a dirt road playing baseball with a stick and a doll's head and a bunch of stinky little kids just like me get to the first tee of Augusta National Golf Club? And so that's all going through my mind. And I'm there and I'm just trying to make a swing. And fortunately, my ball ends up in the fairway, left side of the fairway, a little short of Danny's drive. He teed off first, and then I followed. Then the other two guys teed off, and I really couldn't feel my feet when I'm walking down that fairway, thinking about the history and all those Masters champions that had taken that same walk, the legends, and I'm walking down the fairway. And so I'm really trying to breathe. And so I thought, well, let me talk, because I do that easily. That's my comfort zone. And so I talked to my caddy and I get the club, and I'm like 170 yards out from the pin. Hit a good shot, lands on the green, and true to Augusta, it rolls off the green, off the right front of the green. But I'm still thinking, I'm at Augusta. I'm going to par that first hole. I'm going to make par on my first hole on the championship course at Augusta National. A chip, and 3 putts later, I'm walking off the green with the double bogey. So I had more putts than swings at Augusta National. The hollows and mounds, the undulation of the greens, which television doesn't do justice to. They're hard to navigate. So eventually I collect myself, and on Flowering Crabapple, which is, as you know, all the holes at Augusta have names. And so on that fourth hole, after starting with 3 double bogeys, I hit a high 6-iron over the bunker to a front pin position. The ball plops onto the green, and I'm feet away from a birdie. And then I leave it short. But that's my first par at Augusta National. And I calmed down from there, and I got bogeys and maybe another double. And it's just magical, and everything is perfect. And it's this idea again, I'm coming from a world, I was born into this world that lacked almost everything. And there I am standing in this world that lacks almost nothing, where every blade of grass,
maybe a consciousness,
every blade of grass, where every blade of grass is in its place, where every need a person probably could have when they're there is met. And so it's quite the contrast from the world I was born into and the world I found myself in, tracing across this manicured, neatly manicured lawn.
Amazing. We're talking to Jimmie James, whose new book is called Playing from the Rough, a personal journey through America's 100 greatest golf courses. And we're going to talk more about it right after this. Jimmie, the way you describe your first impressions at Augusta is you can't remember how you got to the tee. You were floating. It was so in your head. Did you journal as soon as you got off the course, or how did you remember so many details of so many rounds of golf? Were you journaling through that? And well, I'm not going to ask the second question. I'll just stop with that.
So I wrote a blog right after I got home. So while it was still fresh in my mind, I wrote a blog. And for the first 5 or so courses, I just remembered everything.
Mm-hmm.
And then we took vacation, came back. We took a vacation, went to Ireland for a week, family vacation. We came back and I started again. And by the time I got to about the 10th course, the details of every single shot and every single hole started to blend together. So
Yeah.
I started then taking notes during each round so that I could make sure I never blended courses during when I wrote a blog about it. So I had notes and details on every hole, every shot, how I saw every hole to the engineer's mind's detail, and so that served as some hard drive memory for me. And for years,
Okay.
so I could meet someone from a particular course, and I could tell them each shot I took on their course. But as more time has passed, then that starts to fade.
Well, when you play that many rounds, I mean, had you ever played 100 rounds in 1 year before?
I played 100 rounds in 1 year, and that year I played about 175 rounds. So in addition to playing
Oh my goodness!
so in addition to playing, and on some of the courses, some of the top 100 courses, I played more than one round. But
Oh, wow.
Across that year, I played about 175 rounds of golf.
You like retirement, huh?
Although it doesn't feel like retirement when you're writing a book.
No, that's right. No, you're absolutely right. My wife published a memoir last June, 2023, her memoir, and I had her on the show, episode 900, to help promote the book. And so living with somebody as they're writing a memoir takes years. It is hard work. It takes a lot of mental fortitude and memory, like jogging your memory, going back, finding things, trying to remember exactly and trying to be accurate as best you can. But here, you're all doing this in a year's time, but then you have your whole life to talk about as well.
Yes, and so that's one of the things was while playing, I would think back, certain things would spark memories from my life, and I would make a note about that because it was a part of my experience on that golf course, and I really wanted to capture the experience of what it felt like to be on the golf course. And I did a blog, and I wanted the reader of the blog to feel that they were right there with me on every single swing. And at the end of that blog, they could feel that they had experienced that course vicariously. And so I wanted to be very detailed so they could picture in their mind exactly what I was doing and where the setting, all those things. So that helped a lot when I started writing the book, because I could refer back to those blogs and be reminded. And it would stir sort of the emotions of the moment, and that brings memories back.
So I want to go over like the sequence of events. When your wife presented you with this opportunity to go play as your retirement present to go play Augusta, at what point from there did you go, oh, wait a minute, I want to now try to get to 100 courses, the top 100 courses in the United States? Where did that fit in?
So first she told me about the gift to Augusta.
Mm-hmm.
Then later she gave me a book by this guy, John Sabino. So I had decided I was going to retire, and I was putting together a plan on what I was going to do that first year of retirement because I didn't want to flunk retirement. I'd seen several colleagues flunk retirement. They'd go back to work.
When you say flunk, do you mean they die or they're just bored out of their mind?
They're bored out of their minds and they go back to work. You have this sense of relevance. You sit at the head of tables. You manage large businesses and lots of people. And so you have this sense of relevance. And then all of a sudden you turn in your badge and all that's gone. So if that's been your life for 35 years, 40 years, it takes some adjusting to do. And so I anticipated that from what I'd observed. And I said, I need a project. I need a plan. I wanted to spend more time at home because I was traveling, 250,000 miles a year around the globe.
Wow.
And my kids were in high school. I'd missed so much of their lives in the years before, in those really impressionable years of high school. I wanted to be there. I wanted to be present. And a lot of people will say, well, but you went off and played these 100 golf courses. I was home a whole lot more than I was home when I was working. I was away 82, 83 nights to play those 100 golf courses, as opposed to being away 200 nights.
Yeah.
So I said, I'll reconnect with the country. I used to drive across the country all the time, meeting with people, stopping and talking with people, really just engaging people and getting a feel for who we were as a country. And I missed doing that. So I said, I'm going to travel. My plan was to travel to all 50 states, take the kids with me to some of the most intriguing places, and play 2 rounds of golf in each state. So this was the initial goal.
Okay.
One with strangers and one with friends in each state. So one private course, one public course. But at Christmas, my wife gave me a book by John Sabino, this golf writer who had traveled around the world and played the top 100 courses in the world. So I was just looking at it from a math standpoint. I'm going to play 100 courses. Why not play the top 100? And I bet no one's ever done that in a year. So why don't I just play all of the top 100 courses in the U.S. and do it in 1 year? I had no idea what I was talking about. I did not understand at the time, how insane that idea was. But
that's always the best way to approach an insane idea, is being blind to it. I've done it multiple times.
And I was blind to it. So a couple of months later, Golf Digest, their issue with their 100 greatest courses comes out. I look at the list. I recognize less than half the courses on the list. There were places I'd never heard of, like Mayakama, the Valley Club of Montecito. Yes, just north of you in Santa Rosa.
It is. So here's my great Mayakama. I have a great Mayakama story. A friend of mine, a neighbor of mine, when they were just about to complete Mayakama, he went up there. He was a real estate genius. And he told them, I'll write you a check right now to get a membership if on one condition. And they're like, great, what's the one condition? He said that I can be the first tee. I get the first round of golf when you open. And they're like, uh, okay, sure. Why do you want to be the first one off? He says, I want to hold the club record.
Even if it's but for a moment, but he can
Even
say,
if it's just for a moment, I had the
I had to.
low round of my Akama. And so he did take me up there and play once when I was just starting to play golf. So I had no appreciation of it whatsoever. But I do remember vaguely how gorgeous it was.
Yeah, that first hole, par 4 uphill. Yeah,
Wow, not that much
yeah,
detail.
it's a it, it, that my Akama, Valley Club of Montecito, um, Eagle Point, uh, just Maidstone, Kenyatta, a whole list of courses I'd never heard of that most people haven't heard of.
And were they mostly West Coast?
No, they're
just
spread
because
across spread across the country. So the courses are
Right.
spread across the country. They're in 33 states. California has 12. New York has 13. And so 25% of the 25% of the courses of the 100 courses are in those two states, and then sprinkled everywhere else, sprinkled in 31 other states in between. So that's how the idea came to me, and I said, this is what I'm going to do. So this is what I'm going to do. And to make it even more challenging, as I said, I'm going to do this just by meeting people, seeing if they're kind enough, enthused enough, interested enough, willing enough to help a stranger achieve a goal, a dream, by just talking to people about what I'm doing. And it was amazing. I would talk to people and I could see their mental Rolodexes going off. And people would do some of the most amazing things to go out of their way to help.
So you went from writing a blog about these courses. At what point did you go, oh, wait, I've got a book here? And then decide to incorporate your growing up memoir part into the book?
So I thought about it, the journey and the contrast. When I finished, I said, this seems like an amazing story that needs to be told. I think that we see the challenges, but not as often do we hear about the triumphs and overcoming those challenges. And so I wanted to write a story that that gave a real true perspective of the challenges we face, but how those challenges could be overcome. And it just seemed like that journey of my life, the arc of my life and the arc of that journey across those golf courses had enough parallels to show the contrast and to inspire anyone who dreams big, whether it's in life or whether it's in golf, that no matter how challenging things become, we can overcome it if we work together. And that at our core, we're kind, generous people. And we connect. In writing the book, one of my goals was to write the stories. There are lots of stories in my life, but how do I pick stories that I think I can write well, write about in a way that's compelling and intriguing and holds the interest of the reader, but also allows the reader to connect to me, to find a piece of themselves in those stories, and realize that no matter how different we may be, no matter how different our backgrounds may be, how different our lives may be, we can relate to each other. There's this piece of this, you stop and you think about it, Fred, there's this piece of this. What's interesting about some guy going around to the most privileged places in the world, in the country, hanging out with very privileged people, playing a very privileged game? That in itself to me isn't interesting or intriguing nor relatable. But when it's an everyday man like me, I have no special talents. I'm not some gifted athlete. I can't sing. I can't dance. I'm just any guy you can meet on the street. And when you look at it from that way, that tells you what is different about America. That tells you that we really have something here that's worth fighting for, that's really worth putting forth an effort to keep and to allow to continue to progress. The aspirations are great, but the only way they come about is if, despite our differences, we find a way to connect to our common humanity and work together to make it a more perfect union. And so I write about my experiences with people all across the country. So, some of the stories as I'm playing golf on these amazing places and hitting great shots and not so great shots at times.
Playing golf.
Some of the experiences I had, like one of the ones I thought was really intriguing was, in a contrast, was I was driving from Evansville, Indiana, to Columbus, Ohio, and I'm in this huge SUV. It's a rental car, Infiniti QX80 or something. The tires on this thing are humongous. And I'm driving along, I'm talking to an old college friend about how I'm traveling very differently from the days when I used to pack everything I own in the back of my 1978 Burgundy Chevy Monte Carlo. The books, the stereo, the little black and white television, and the clothes. That was it. That was all of my earthly possessions. And now I'm driving around this huge monstrosity of a vehicle, and the indicator light for low tire pressure comes on. And I pull over along the side of the interstate, and there's the tire. I could hear the air coming out of the tire. And so there's no way on this. It's a dark, drizzly night in the middle of nowhere. And there's no way I'm going to get out with 18-wheelers going by at 70, 75 miles an hour and change this flat. So I call the roadside service. It takes about an hour, but this guy shows up in a tow truck, and he starts to back up toward my vehicle, starts to let the bed down like he's going to tow. I get out and I go over and talk to him. I try to lighten the moment with him because he seems pretty angry after I tell him that I don't need a tow, just a flat changed. And that really seemed to tick him off. And so finally, I just say to the guy, I'd ask him his name, told him my name. His name is George. I say to George, so George, what gives? Why are you so upset about this situation? It was like, I just drove an hour for $10 effing dollars. And I'm like, that blew me away, that this guy was only going to make $10 on this tire change. And so I asked him, how much would you make if you were towing me? He said, $20. The difference to him was huge. And here I am, and George is white. I could see the tiredness in his eyes, the roughness of his hands when I shook them, that this was a guy who spent his life working with his hands and his back and weighed down by the burdens that came with all of that. And all he's trying to do is make a living. And here I am, traveling across the country, chasing this frivolous dream, spending way more money than I'd care to talk about, to do this, talking to this guy for whom $10 makes the world of a difference. So I assured George that my tip to him, I didn't know how much they were going to pay him or whatever, but my tip to him would make it worth his while because
To change the
to
tire.
change the tire, because
Yeah.
what
That's
he
what I'm
was doing
thinking,
for
too.
me was worth a whole lot more than $10
Right.
or even $20. And so at the end, when I gave him the tip, he smiled and the anger went out of him just as quickly as the air had gone out of that tire. And we shook and we shook hands. And the way I thought about it is George went off to his America and I went off to mine. And it's two different Americas that contrast, that collided along the side of that interstate that night. But it was a reminder to me that we can never forget that it's the Georges of the world that make this world work. Without George,
Right.
I'd been stuck on that freeway, stuck on that highway that night. So,
But there's another part of America where you had to have some anxiety of being an African American man in the middle of the night with a big SUV on the side of the road. The stories that we hear had to be create a little bit of anxiety.
actually, honestly, that night, there was no anxiety on that. I had
Great.
anxiety.
I love hearing
I
that.
had the place where I had anxiety is when I was driving through Kansas and I got pulled over for speeding when I knew I wasn't speeding by a cop in
We always
by
know
a cop
that.
in a pickup truck. But that even turned out to be just my anxiety, because it was more, at the end of the day, it was really the small town collecting money. It was a small town shakedown as opposed to being stopped for driving while black. It was being stopped for driving with out-of-state tags. But that's anxiety, and that's something that you do feel, and that comes. A lot of people try to say, well, you look at the numbers, and I'm a numbers guy, so I know that about 1,000 people a year, 1,000 people total per year are killed by police officers. That's 1,000, obviously too many. About 25 or so of those are unarmed. About a quarter of those are African Americans. And so when you look at the numbers, it's disproportional, but not vastly disproportional. But that doesn't tell the whole story. I've been pulled over in my life several times for driving while black. And when that happens to you and you know they're just messing with you, your lived experiences become more significant than the numbers. And so those are the things. And I think we've made a tremendous amount of progress from when I had kids, college kids, riding through my neighborhood, through the Sawmill Quarters in Huntsville, Texas, when I was 5, 6, 7 years old, yelling racial epithets. We've come a long way. We've still got progress to make, but we've come a long way. And I think we've made substantial progress, but still have a lot of work to do. But I still have times, I'm in Philadelphia, and I was sitting out in front of a vet's office next to, there was a bakery. There's a bakery next to the vet's office. I'm sitting out while the vet's taking care of our dog, doing the exam and all that. I'm just sitting out there hanging out. This woman passes me, stops and says, "I'm so sorry, I don't have any change with me." I'm like, "Excuse me?" She says, "I can't give you any money." I said, "Ma'am, I didn't ask you for any money." And then she goes, I'm sorry. But there's this assumption. So I have that. But at the same time, most of the people, the vast majority of people who helped me gain access to all these courses were white. And to them, I was a stranger. They invited me into their club, their homes, and their lives. And so we have to acknowledge that progress that's been made and then continue to work toward making more progress.
You and I are both engineering people, but we very different types of engineers in our training. But I've always been fascinated by there was a great, I don't know, it was a bumper sticker or a T-shirt, but it said, "Optimists see the world, the glasses half full. Pessimists see the glasses half empty, and engineers are wondering why we need a glass that's twice the size of what we need."
Yeah.
But you had a very successful career working for ExxonMobil for 35 years, you said, and you worked your way up to a prominent position there where you could retire at a doable age and pursue an amazing and outrageous goal. I'd love to talk about more of these golf courses that even without writing it down, that would stick in your mind forever.
Yeah. So there's this course that very few people have heard of. It's in southern Illinois, across the border from Terre Haute, Indiana, up U.S. Highway 1 in Marshall, Indiana, Marshall, Illinois. And it's called Kenyatta, Canyatta. It's very private, owned by one guy. There's 0 members. There's no pro staff. There's just the groundskeeper and his crew. And that day that I played it, I was the only guest for the course.
Wow.
I had this entire course to myself.
Creepy. That's got to be.
No, I mean, it was amazing for me. So when I was a boy, I lived in what we call the country, the wide open prairies, and I ran barefoot through the woods and went on all these exploratory trips and just communed with nature. And I felt at home. And so I played the front 9 by myself, and the golf course superintendent played with me on the back 9. But it was just so peaceful. The symphony of the noises from nature. It was me and those along these dew-covered fairways where my footprints were the only footprints in the dew. And this boy who grew up without a bed, let alone a room of his own, had a golf course all to himself. That's an amazing course. That's a private course. Then you've got Cypress Point. Cypress Point, the beauty, the variety of holes where you can play each hole. Not only are the holes different, but each hole can be played so many different ways. And then there's this par 3 probably the best risk reward par 3 in the country is the 16th hole.
The iconic one, I'm
sure.
The
iconic 16th hole.
Yeah.
Where you have a choice of hitting over this cove to the green. It takes about 185 yards to clear. The hole is longer, but to clear, it's 210 yards or so, but to clear over the cove, you've got to hit it about 185 yards. And
you're going due west, probably right into the wind.
Yes.
It's coming off the ocean.
So and a lot of people will bail out to the left and chip up and hope that they one putt and make par. But I'd flown 3,000 miles across the country in a tube at 35,000 feet. And I said, I'm not going to cross the whole country to bail out left on the golf course.
I'm going for
it. And for 182 of those 185 yards to clear the cove and get on the other side of the cliff, my ball looked splendid sailing through the blue sky. But those last 3, it never made it. It plummeted down toward Davy Jones's locker. But still, what an awesome experience. Then I bailed out to the left, chipped up, one putted for my double bogey, which would have been a par had I not taken a risk on that.
Your second
Yeah.
ball par.
So
Right,
that's
right.
one of my top 5 courses that I played. Augusta National, one of the top 5, because it's such a magical, mystical place. You got
Yeah.
Marion, that's in
Yeah.
Philadelphia.
What's your Mount Rushmore of
Yeah,
courses?
so
If you had to pick 4.
five. I got to go with 5.
Okay, I'll let you go
So
5.
we
All
talked
right.
about Cypress Point.
Yep.
We talked about Augusta. Marion, so rich in golf tradition and so much respect by the membership for the traditions of the game and the honor of the game. So, and then a course that's just spectacular with the layout, the holes. They say you experience the first 6 holes are like, I think, are drama, the middle 6 are comedy, the last 6 are tragedy. I felt all of that on the first 3 holes. I had comedy, tragedy, and drama on the first 3 holes. But it's a special place. And then there's Pine Valley, where there you go on your shirt. On your shirt,
I'm wearing the
You-
shirt, and it's a gift from a friend who played there. I did not, but I knew today I had to wear this shirt.
Yes.
Yes, go ahead.
So you got Pine Valley, where, at some courses you have what they call let up holes, where the course could be hard, but there's an easy hole here or there. At Pine Valley, you don't even have let up shots. Every shot you have to be on. The slightest of misses gets you in a lot of trouble that it's hard to recover from. The holes, some of the holes play extremely long. They play along ravines. There's a lot of sand. The rough is scraggly. The greens are surrounded by bunkers and scraggly rough. You've got to really always fly the ball onto the green. It's a challenge to anyone's game. There's the 5th hole is a long par, about 245 yard par 3. And I just refuse, just on principle, to ever hit anything more than a 3-wood off the tee. So it's like, I'm going to hit my 3-wood. It's going to go as far as it's going to go, and I'm going to play it from there. I'm not going to hit a driver. That's too much. I got too much pride to hit a driver on a par 3. But it is. So it's a great experience. And then,
When you play the winds, like when you play at Bandon Dunes and you get the winds up there, that's a place where you're like, yeah, I may need a driver on this hole, even though it's 140 yards.
Yeah, you can have that with the winds coming off the ocean. And then the last one, Fisher's Island. The 5th is Fisher's Island, which is a Seth Rayner design with template holes that these holes were holes that C.B. Macdonald discovered when he traveled through the British Isles and saw holes that he thought both amateur golfers, novice golfers, and experts would like. And he came back to the U.S. and designed these courses with them. And one of his proteges is Seth Rayner, who also designed some. And so you have this charming island in Long Island Sound. Around the perimeter, these holes form the golf course. Charming, beautiful, and the template holes. So those are my 5. Augusta National, no certain order, but Augusta National, Pine Valley, Marion, Fisher's Island, and Cypress Point. Oh. That's a lifetime worth of golf in most cases, just to play one of those. And I played those 5 plus 95 others all in that 12-month period. So it was a mind-boggling experience to see all these great courses in such a short time.
Jimmie, I am so honored to meet you after reading your book. I closed the book, and I've read numerous golf books for the podcast and otherwise, but this is the first time I ever closed a book and said, I want to play golf with this guy. I want to go out, because there's so many things that I felt parallel in my life with yours, a similar age, but, hardships, no, we can't compare, and I'll never try. But there were so many parts in the book that I highlighted that I'd love to discuss. Well, we won't have that time today. The line like, I was my mother's 4th live birth. That just kind of like stopped me in my tracks. But I want to talk about one of the things you wrote. We just finished the PGA Championship this past weekend that was played at Valhalla, which you got to play.
Right.
But the line that you had in there that really kind of jumped out at me was saying, being Black conferred a greater sense of powerlessness than being poor, though poverty was a constant presence in our lives. You also said, relentless reminder of our status as second-class citizens. There were still whites-only signs posted on doors and windows around downtown.
Yeah, so that was life in the Jim Crow era in Texas back in the early 60s. We lived in, I was born sort of in the backwoods. We moved to this small town, Huntsville. And when I was like 3 years old, 2 years old, 3 years old. And then we moved to the Selma quarters. My mother met this guy who became, I guess, my stepfather. But we lived in a shack. It was a tin roof shack on a dirt road. No plumbing, no electricity, outhouse. And on Friday nights, when the music would die down and the people that would come to my Aunt Essie Pearl's next door for sort of a juke joint night, when they all went home, this other ritual would start. And it would be the white college kids driving drunk down our dirt road, throwing beer bottles, Pearl beer and Long Star beer bottles at us, at our houses. We were inside sleep, of course, but awakened by them, and yelling racial epithets. And that was that sense of powerlessness at the time that I was a kid. And I think that's some of the progress we have made from what life was like during that time in the early 60s and where we are now. But we were clearly second-class citizens.
Right.
Yeah.
You wrote in the you wrote in the foreword, said, history has often been written as if people like me were voiceless extras in a movie we were never intended to see.
Right. So my birth certificate has two words that were on it that were considered important back in the early 1960s. And they were that I was illegitimate, meaning I did not legally exist, and I was colored. So that is so dehumanizing, demeaning, and I had to live with that. It gave me this sense of being less than. Mm-hmm. And so that's something that I struggled with and had to overcome. And it's challenges. But the thing that I would also say for it here is I write about my life factually, not to compare the challenges. I make that point too. When I talk about Frank McCourt's version of the Irish version of the life that I had. I think everybody has challenges. And to each person, their challenge is daunting. To them, their challenge is daunting. And that our lives are determined at the intersection of adversity and aspirations. When our biggest hopes and dreams for our lives are threatened by the biggest challenges we face, what do? And for me, because I had a mother who modeled it, you don't quit. You find a way. And so even as I look at what we face as a country today, my answer to all of that is not to quit, not to give up, but to find a way to work through it. to find a way to get beyond it, to find a way to come together. You hear this talk, and I read about this in the book also, that you're only as strong as your weakest link. That is exactly right for a chain. And I can tell you from an engineering standpoint, when you look at the granular structure of steel, and you look at the front body cubics and front center cubics, and you have stress points. And yes, that chain is only as strong as that weakest link. But a society isn't a chain. And in a society, we have strengths and weaknesses, and we can work together to overcome each other's strengths and weaknesses. We can lift each other up and be much stronger than we are individual links, because we are a society. And so in the midst of all of what we're going through now, rather than looking for what divides us, we got to find that common humanity. And I talk about that in the sense too of, for every person, as I mentioned earlier, every person who reads this book, I hope in my stories, they find a piece of themselves. They find something that they can relate to, something that reminds them of their lives, and something that causes them to do what I do from time to time, and that is get a little nostalgic for the simplicity that life once offered. Because at our core, at our basic, simple levels, what I saw at country clubs and what I saw on the side of the road in Evansville, Indiana, eating dinner at a Golden Corral, where that we have the same hopes and dreams and aspirations for the ones we love and the same challenges. And we're all trying to get through it.
Right. So, yes, we all have our own challenges. Mine are definitely not similar to you, but I did lose both of my parents when I was 7 years old. And I've always lived my life. I think this is kind of like why I love golf, is that your life isn't defined by what has happened to you. Your life is defined on how you deal with it.
Exactly.
And how you meet those challenges. And you're going to have them. You don't need to, it doesn't need to be the first thing that enters the room in front of you. And I remember a cartoon once. Maybe it was a Charlie Brown cartoon, but he was like, why did you only shine the front of your shoes? And he says, I only want to know people, I want to have a good first impression so that people don't think of me, poorly. So I just need to have my shoes clean in the front. And to me, it's like, I want to have the back of my shoes cleaned, right? Yeah. I want when I walk out, people go, yeah, okay. Yeah. He's met the challenges. And golf is like that.
The first time I hit a golf ball purely and watched it soar off into the sky, that feeling, that sense of accomplishment, it's just, it's amazing. And now I will tell you how I relate that back to life. My ancestors were put in the bottom of a ship, scrunched together like sardines, eating and defecating in the same space. But somehow they survived. And not only did they survive, they helped build a country. And they laid a foundation for us. And they endured what they endured. What we endure is nothing compared to what they endured. But yet they found a way to survive. Yeah. We ought to be able together to find a way to make this country a better country.
And stop taking it for granted.
Stop taking it for granted. I played golf. One of the courses I played golf at was Whispering Pines. Whispering Pines is less than 25 miles from the plantation where my ancestors were slaves. They could never have imagined that one day one one of their descendants would be playing a leisure sport on that land where they had toiled and been chattel slavery, owned by someone.
Right.
And so I look at that. We've made a lot of progress in a couple of hundred years, but we got a lot more progress to make.
A long way to go.
A lot more progress to make. But we're not going to make that progress if we don't work together, if we don't come together and work together and make it happen. It is not up to someone else to make it happen. It's up to us working together to make it happen. It's not just about what whites are going to do. It's not just about what blacks are going to do. We all have a responsibility. We got to do it together.
Yes. So after losing my parents, I was raised by my grandparents who had to escape the Ukraine, which at the time was Russia, from the pogroms, where my grandmother, who raised me, lost all of her family to the Cossacks, and then had to sneak onto a boat from Europe to the United States while she was pregnant, lost the baby, and they sent her back when she got to the United States. So I'm not saying we have the same story. But as I said to you before, I want to play golf with you because we have a lot of similarities that we can share, the pain and suffering of lives and the successes
of lives
that we can
so
share.
I will say to you that the elements of our story may be different, but we have the same story. We have the human story.
I didn't want to be so presumptuous.
We have the human story, the human experience. You know, a lot of people make the mistake thinking that golf is supposed to be easy. Some people make that mistake. Golf is not easy. Golf is hard. Golf is hard.
Yeah.
Life is not easy. Life is hard. And one of the things I say in the book too is that people are resilient, but life is tenuous.
Mm-hmm.
And to go through, to make it through, to overcome the challenges, we can never take that for granted. It's not a given. And we have struggled. Blacks have struggled in this country. But we're not the only ones that have struggled. Humans throughout human history, we've all struggled. And those struggles are different. And some of those struggles are brought about by evil, and some are just the natural conditions of life. But as you said earlier, we're more defined not by the challenges we face, but by the things we achieve despite those challenges, by the things we overcome. And everybody has overcome something, and we should respect that and appreciate that.
Absolutely. I highly, highly recommend that everybody read this book. If you're a golf fan at all, you got to read this book. If you're a fan of memoirs, you got to read this book. It's so worth it and so powerful, and it's such a joyous journey to follow. Congratulations on the book. Congratulations on your success. The book, again, is called Playing from the Rough, a personal journey through America's 100 greatest golf courses. ... by Jimmie James. Jimmie, we're going to play golf together someday.
We're going to play golf together. We'll play golf together either in California or maybe in Atlanta with Dr. Bob Jones over at Bobby Jones Golf Course.
I'm in.
Or we could play out at his Atlanta Athletic Club. He's got 2 courses out there. So we will play golf together.
Again, Jimmie's book, Playing from the Rough, published by Simon & Schuster, will be available for purchase on June 11th, 2024. I'm sure that you can pre-order it right now from your favorite bookseller and get it delivered as soon as it is released. Getting to complete the interview and being able to deliver this conversation to you before the book's release was actually quite a coup. I received a press release yesterday from the PR firm saying that Jimmie will be available for interview starting June 7th, which is a couple days from now. And I enjoyed this story so much that even after the interview, I continued to read the book, which doesn't always happen, and I'm enjoying it immensely. I mentioned the 3-day civil rights tour through Atlanta, Georgia, Montgomery, Selma, and Birmingham, Alabama that we went on this past February. I invite you to stay tuned after this episode because I want to share with you an episode of Joanne's podcast, Joanne's my wife, called In This Story, about her reflections on our journey and discovery through the Deep South. The In This Story podcast is a collection of short micro-essays Joanne writes reflecting on her life and life's adventures. She's got a great voice, is an excellent writer, and this podcast is very entertaining and enlightening. Please subscribe and get a new episode every other week. And I know if she's listening, which rarely happens, but if she is listening, she's like, would you stop bragging about me? No, my dear, never. But first, let's talk about playing golf together in September and next spring. On our civil rights tour, as the bus left Atlanta headed for Montgomery, isn't that a song title? Oh, well. Not long after we entered Alabama, we passed a sign that said Robert Trent Jones Golf Trail, which I've always wanted to visit. And now that I realized how accessible it is from Atlanta, and then was contacted by Tara Fox about partnering with TMI Golf, about doing golf adventures with the Golf Smarter community, especially our ambassadors, I knew this could be another bucket list item checked off. But first, why don't you and your partner join me and Joanne for an outrageous adventure to Portugal this September 5th through the 13th, 2024. We've scheduled 3 rounds of golf, but if you'd prefer, you can play golf every day we're on the coast of Vila Moura. There's lots of flexibility in our schedule. Non-golfers will experience optional spa visits, sightseeing, and time to relax on the beach. And you'll have time to yourselves to make this one of the most memorable and romantic trips of your life. Go ahead, you make the plans. She'll be touched by your thoughtfulness, right? Do we ever make plans other than playing golf? And do we get a hard time for it? Okay, I'm speaking about myself. So clear your calendar and let's do this. To get all the information, pricing, and download the detailed PDF, please visit tmigolf.com/golfsmarter. And if you have any questions, please write to me directly. I want to thank this week's Golf Smarter ambassador, Gene Thornton of Nutley, New Jersey. Gene wanted to get more out of his rounds at Hendricks Golf Course, so he took advantage of getting a free copy of Tony Manzoni's video of the Lost Fundamental. So if you've been listening to our Tony Manzoni series and would like to get Tony's video for free, then all you have to do is create an intro for an upcoming Golf Smarter episode. But if you'd like to try something else, it's up to you. Choose between Tony's video, a glove and glove storage compartment from redroostergolf.com, the online glove subscription service that has high-quality gloves you get delivered to your door as often as you'd like, or a box of the premium Flight Path golf tees, my favorite tee of all time, a tee above all. So write to Golf Smarter Podcast at gmail.com, and I'll get back to you with some simple instructions on what to do, what to say, and how to take advantage of your free gift. This Friday, we'll release the final episode of our Tony Manzoni series for 2024. It's a conversation that's never been replayed before, and it includes one of my all-time favorite stories that Tony has shared.
I had met Frank Sinatra and invited to the house on many occasions with my fiancée, and one day out of the blue, she blurted to Frank, Frank, you've got to come over to the house and we'll cook you dinner. And of course, my eyes rolled back to the back of my head because she was a beautiful girl, but she really couldn't boil water. Okay. So when we got in the car, I said, are you going to serve Frank Sinatra beans and Franks? Are you crazy? So I said, and she looked at me with that pretty little face, and I said, I got this handled. So I called my mother, who was in San Jose, and I said, Mom, and I didn't say Frank Sinatra. I just said, I've got some really important people coming over. Can you make some homemade raviolis and meatballs, put them on dry ice, and fly them? I'll pay for it. Fly it from San Jose to Palm Springs. So she said, sure, no problem. So she sent all this food over in dry ice, and I had a good friend of mine who was a musician, and he wanted to be there when Frank Sinatra was, and he said, I'll help you arrange everything, cook everything. So we did. And Frank shows up with Jilly Rizzo, who is his good time friend, and so we sit down and eat, and we're talking and so forth.
He said yes? She asked him to come to dinner.
Oh yeah, he had said yes at his house when we were having dinner. He said yes. Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so the pressure was on a bit. So anyway, so we're sitting there, and Frank says to me, or he says to my fiance Mimi, he says, Mimi, these are the best meatballs I've ever had in my life. He says, I mean, I've eaten all over the world. You got to give me the recipe. And she started to say something. I said, Frank, the charade has to be over. And I told him the story, that what I did. And he started howling. He thought that was the funniest thing. He says, get your mother on the phone. So I called my mother, and my mother's name was Nina. So I said, Mom, I said, Frank Sinatra would like to talk to you. She said, get the hell out of here. And I said, no,
No, Mom, that's who you were cooking for.
I said, Frank Sinatra would like to talk to you. So he gets on the phone. And you got to remember, at our house, we had a picture of Jesus, and then next to him we had a picture of Frank. Okay, so my mother says, hello, Mr. Sinatra. And he says, Nina, he says, I got to tell you something. Those are the best meatballs I've ever had, blah, 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 blah. And can you send me the recipe? And my mother said to him, Frank, I'll make you all the meatballs you want, but you never get my recipe. And he broke up. He just loved that she denied him, okay?
Oh, nobody did that to Frank Sinatra. Nobody said no to Frank Sinatra.
He just loved her for that. And through the years, she used to make Christmas cookies, all homemade, unbelievable. And she would always send him Christmas cookies every Christmas. And he was so wonderful. Whenever he appeared in San Francisco or wherever my folks went, they sat at the Sinatra table right against the stage. The guy was just amazing. But just when Christmas came, he'd say, you think your mom's going to send the cookies? I said, Frank, you can just count on it.
If you have any questions, comments, or suggestions for upcoming episodes, or need more information and want to discuss our September Portugal adventure, please write to golfsmarterpodcast@gmail.com or click on the Hey Fred button when you visit golfsmarter.com. And now, in this story.
In this story, a journey to Alabama. I'm Joanne Greene. On vacation, we travel for rest, relaxation, and adventure. Other times, we brace ourselves and head out into a great unknown to bear witness, to expose ourselves to the horrors of history, to learn about people and actions that have impacted countless others for generations, so we don't let it happen again. Visiting the Theresienstadt and Auschwitz concentration camps years ago was like that for me. Seeing where the horrors took place and hearing from people who lived it made history come alive in a very different way. Yes, it was painful, but unlike so many Jews, including my great-uncles, I got to walk out and reboard the bus. In many ways, my recent civil rights trip to Georgia and Alabama was like that. When you're face to face with people who were there, on the very ground where atrocities were committed, you can't pretend that it didn't happen. And knowing can lead to action. As a child outside of Boston in the early 1960s, I heard about the civil rights movement. Of course everyone is created equal, I thought, no matter their skin color. Why then could Hattie, our cleaning woman's daughter, come and play at my house, but I wasn't allowed to visit her? If her neighborhood was dangerous, as my father warned, why did she live there? The more I've learned about our country's history, from slavery through Jim Crow, the Great Migration, the fight for voting rights, police brutality to young black men, and mass incarceration, the more curious I've been to hear personal stories, especially from those who were on the front lines. As with Holocaust survivors, time is running out to hear first-person testimonies from Bloody Sunday on the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma, and from the park in Birmingham where vicious dogs and high-power water hoses were set on black children. Reading books, listening to podcasts, and watching films about the arc of African American history is powerful, and I believe essential. To understand race relations in the U.S. requires an understanding of what's taken place for hundreds of years and what is taking place today. But sitting with people, face to face, and hearing how their lives have been defined by the civil rights movement provides a deeper level of impact.
I don't know what it's going to take to make the world right. I do know that you should not be sitting waiting for it to happen, for somebody else to do it.
That's the voice of Joanne Bland, a wise, passionate, straight-talking 70-year-old Black woman from Selma who vividly recalls staring into the window of the local drugstore where only the white kids could order sodas and sit at the counter. We met her in a large, dark space filled with artifacts and memorabilia from her life of activism. As a child, she told us, the women of her church were organizing to be able to vote in the upcoming elections. Then, Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. came to town and organized a Sunday protest march across the Edmund Pettus Bridge. Joanne was 11, and she went with her then 15-year-old sister, Linda. When they came up over the high point on the bridge, they saw sheriff's deputies mounted on horseback, blocking their path. Within minutes, they were being chased and beaten. Linda sustained serious head injuries, but a few days later, stitched up and ready for more, Joanne's sister went on to be the youngest person to march all the way from Selma to Montgomery. Joanne Bland is among many featured in an excellent NPR podcast series entitled White Lies, from which this audio was taken.
When you talk about reconciliation, you have to talk about a way to distribute the power. And nobody wants to give up any power. Anytime there's a minute shift in power from the people who are holding the power, a battle ensues. I can give you a perfect example. The signing of the Voting Rights Act in 1965. Tell me 1 year it has not been under attack. Come on, I'm listening. So if voting's not important, why would you try to keep it away from me? And why would you try to stop people from voting after they get the right to vote, if it wasn't important?
Joanne Bland co-founded the National Voting Rights Museum in Selma. Her sister Linda Blackman Lowry's book, Turning 15 on the Road to Freedom, My Story of the 1965 Selma Voting Rights March, is appropriate for young readers and is available on Amazon. In Birmingham, Alabama, we had the privilege of spending an hour with the Bishop Calvin Wallace Woods Sr., perhaps the feistiest, most passionate 90-year-old I'll ever meet. He told us about the March on Washington in '63, what it was like the day the 16th Street Baptist Church was bombed and those 4 young girls were killed. Hearing his voice crack as he shared the pain he and others endured at the hands of Bull Connor, then Commissioner of Public Safety in Birmingham, was so powerful.
During the movement, the Lord brought different songs to us. Sometimes we didn't know what people were going to sing, but he always taught us to join in with those songs of heaven that he gave us. And let's begin with one we used to sing, I ain't gonna let nobody turn me around. Turn me around. I'm gonna keep on walking. I'm gonna keep on talking. Marching up to freedom land. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around. Turn me around. Turn me around. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around. I'm gonna keep on walking. Keep on talking, marching up to freedom. Ain't gonna let injustice turn me around. Oh, turn me around. Oh, turn me around.
Our group of 26 was both white and Jewish. and it was evident that each of us felt the pain and applauded the courage of these civil rights heroes. We returned to our homes, changed, and resolved to do more as the battle for voting rights continues. Thanks so much for listening to In This Story, my memoir-style micro-essays. I've written a full-length book, By Accident, A Memoir of Letting Go, which is now available in paperback, as an ebook, and as an audiobook. You can purchase it online or at your favorite local bookstore. If they don't have it in stock, they can order it through Publishers Group West, a division of Ingram. Again, it's By Accident, A Memoir of Letting Go by Joanne Greene.